Hi, I'm Kenny. In this video, I will talk about the eligibility requirements for a study permit application one by one and explain how you can satisfy each of them. I will only talk about the initial study permit application, that is your first study permit, not the renewal application that you will need to make when you are in the middle of your study in Canada and your study permit just expires. Now let's start. Let's start with the subsection 1 of section 216 of the IRPR. An officer shall issue a study permit to a foreign national if, following an examination, it is established that the foreign national A. applied for it in accordance with this part. What does that mean? Let's look at above. The division 2 of this part is about the application for study permit. It stipulates that, basically, every foreign national shall apply before entry, but some of them may also apply on the entry, and even after entry. I may prepare another video to talk about this particularly, and in fact, besides the requirement on the place of application, you will also need to, of course, follow the visa office instructions to apply for the study permit. For example, you need to fill and sign all the forms, provide all the supporting documents, pay the fees correctly, and submit to your biometrics if you are required, and follow the rest of the visa office instructions as well. So this requirement is quite straightforward, isn't it? B. Will leave Canada by the end of the authorized stay. This requirement is probably the most complicated one. To satisfy this requirement, you can use the twofold approach, which is on one hand, you can present that you have sufficient ties outside of Canada. This includes your employment, assets, your family ties, your financial obligations such as mortgage payment or house rental payment, and even your pets. On the other hand, you need to prove that you are a genuine student. In many cases, especially for adult study permit application, you can substantiate your motivation of study by a study plan. For adult student, I have prepared a paid course about how to prepare a satisfactory study plan. You can refer to it for more details. For minor students or fresh high school graduates, you need to focus more on your funds because you will likely need to study for a longer time than those adult students that will require more money to support your study in Canada. And I will talk about this requirement later with more details. As to the motivation for these minor students or fresh high school graduates, it's naturally reasonable for the rich family to pursue the high-quality education in Canada for their children. But if you have any specific family reason, please do include them in your motivation letter. So this is how you can satisfy the officer that you will leave Canada by the end of the authorized stay. The next one is C. Meets the requirements of this part. I will talk about this later in more details. D. Meets the requirements of subsections 32 and 3 if they must submit to a medical examination. This is easy to understand and satisfy. If your visa office instruction requires you to submit a medical examination, you just follow it. And E. Has been accepted to undertake a course or program of study at a DLI. Although there are some exceptional cases, mostly for minor children, you may not need an offer letter to apply for a study permit. In most cases, you must have an offer letter from a DLI to apply for a Canada study permit. If you need help in applying for the admission at a Canada institution, I'm putting a link below the video that may help you. Now let's look back at other requirements of this part. This is section 220, Financial Resources. An officer shall not issue a study permit to a foreign national unless they have sufficient and available financial resources without working in Canada to pay the tuition fees for the course or program, maintain themselves and any family members who are accompanying them, and pay the cost of transporting themselves and the family members to and from Canada. This means to get your study permit application approved, you need to prove that you have enough money to support your study in Canada. To satisfy this requirement, firstly you need to understand which cost you need to cover, and there are 3 parts of them: your tuition fee, the living cost, and the transportation fee. Although it's up to you to decide if you want to return to your home country once a year or even at every break, you need at least to cover one double trip to and from Canada. In the case you have your family members accompanying you to study in Canada, you also need to cover their living cost and transportation fee. For example, if you are a parent bringing your minor child to study in Canada, there are 2 family members in total you need to prepare the funds for. In the case you are an adult student, you may bring your spouse under an open work permit if your program is eligible. And if not, you can still bring your spouse under a temporary resident visa. So there are also 2 family members in this case. You can also bring your minor child when you study in Canada. That means if you bring your spouse and your child, there will be 3 family members in total. As to how much money you will need to cover as a living cost, the IRCC lists a number for you. Let's check it out. If you study in all provinces except Quebec, according to the number of your family members, including yourself, this is the minimum amount you will need to cover your living cost. This number may be updated every year, so I will put the link below the video. You can check it out from time to time. In many cases, the amount of the tuition fee is quite straightforward. You can find that numbers on your letter of admission. However, it may be complicated if you are offered a research program such as a PhD or some master's program, especially with scholarship or some other forms of financial assistance. You need to double confirm with your institution about how much money you need to prepare for your tuition fee. Now you should be able to figure out how much money you will need to study for 1 year in Canada. You may already have all the funds available at your hand. Is it true that you just satisfy the visa officer when you have, for example, 100k Canadian dollars in your bank account? In many cases, probably not, because it is not enough that you just have that money in your hand. More importantly, you need to prove that the money belongs to you and you can use them at your will. As to how you can prove that, it can be complicated, and you can refer to my paid course for more details. In the case your program is much longer, for example, you are going to study a bachelor's degree program of 4 years, or you plan to send your child to Canada to study the elementary school and will study throughout the secondary school, which can be many years in total. It would be very much similar if you have all the funds for so many years up front at your hand. You can follow what I just explained to satisfy this requirement. However, if you have only, let's say, the funds for the first 2 years with a study plan of 6 years, you will need to prove that you will have enough money to support the rest years of study in Canada. For example, if you send your child to study secondary school in Canada, you can explain and prove that how much you will have as your family annual income, and besides the regular living cost, how much balance you would have, and therefore how you can have enough money left to support your child to study in Canada on an ongoing basis. However, this would often be very difficult if at least one of the parents will accompany the child to study in Canada, because that parent is not allowed to work in Canada. Please note, when you try to prove that you will have enough money to support your child to study in Canada on an ongoing basis, your standard of proof is balance of probabilities, meaning that you will need to prove that you will more likely to have enough funds than not have it. And in reality, this can be very subjective, and I always recommend you to try your very best to lift your standard of proof as high as possible for a better chance to get your application approved. But remember, you cannot rely on working in Canada for the financial resources, although in many cases, you can work when you study in Canada. Just like what we saw just now, Section 220 stipulates this point explicitly, so keep it in mind. Some people may ask that, can I apply for a Canada study permit when I reside in a third country that is not the country of my nationality? Many people, including some professionals, may say no, you cannot. But I say yes, as long as you are aware of some factors you need to consider. For this purpose, I prepared a paid course. You can refer it for more details. In occasion, some rich families want to send their children to study in Canada as early as possible. For example, I once had a client ask me that my child is 3 years old. Can I bring him to Canada to study? To find this out, we need to firstly understand that, as we just saw, to get a study permit, you need an offer letter from a DLI in Canada. Let's find out who can become a DLI. This is the DLI list published by the IRCC, and it says all primary and secondary schools in Canada are DLI. It doesn't mention any other institution that accepts any younger students than primary school. So you may think that is the lowest age to study in Canada, grade 1? Now let's find out. This is a government website to introduce the elementary school in Canada. As you can see, it says children start kindergarten when they reach age 4 or 5 at elementary school in Canada. Therefore, the lowest grade for an international student in Canada is kindergarten at elementary school. And if you want to prepare your child in advance, you can start the preparation when your child is about 3 years old. As a matter of fact, I already have a client who is accompanying her daughter studying kindergarten in Canada, and that application went super smoothly. So far, I have explained every single requirement for study permit application and discussed how you can satisfy them. I hope with this knowledge, you are now confident in your study permit application. But if you have any questions, please do let me know. I'm Kenny. Learn my lessons on your way to Canada. See you in next video.